So, okay, let's talk about your path to publication. At what point do you, your literary agent is Sarah Crow, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it traditional? You go and you find a literary agent and she finds you the deal that you want, or how's the process work?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess having worked in publishing, I knew how it all worked, and I knew I'd want to find an agent. So even when I was still in the business, I was getting to know agents, through their submissions to my boss, and I was starting to get to know some of them on my own too, like as I was trying to rise up to become an editor myself. And Sarah was one of the agents that I connected with back then. I always loved her submissions and her authors and her as a person. She's someone I got to go out to lunch with a couple of times as a sort of business lunch. And so when I left, I sort of had this like list in my head of who I'd want to represent me in my dream life of, becoming a writer a year later, which of course ended up being 10 years later, but she was always at the top of my list. So when I finally felt ready to find an agent, she was the first person I submitted my manuscript to. And there was a little bit of a process. It still took a year before I actually ended up signing with her. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting process. And I think it definitely helped that I had had some inside experience going through that process. So yeah.
So with that inside experience then, and Sarah Crow, if you're listening, we would also love to chat with you sometime. How do you, with the experience that you have with, this, with what you're bringing to this, how do you go about deciding who's going to be the ideal agent, and then what makes Sarah Crow your first choice?
Well, I think it was really having connected with her when I was in the business, when I was in the industry. And then, of course, she's had this meteoric rise. She's sort of become a superstar over the past 10 years. So I guess, and I've just loved all the books that she's represented, all the authors that she's represented, and, continue to sort of aspire to the authors that she works with. And then she is at Pippin Properties, which again is like a dream agency in terms of like a boutique children's literary agency. So I think, it just was she was the person that felt right to me in terms of who I would trust to find the right home for my book and have a connection with, working with, in terms of author-agent relationship, which even though I had been on the other side of publishing and editorial, that relationship is still a little bit new to me. What is it like? What does it mean to be the author and have an agent? Like I'm still figuring that out, I think, even though that's something that is new. But it's been wonderful, and I'm so grateful to her. I mean, she helped me revise this. We spent a few months revising it before we even submitted to editors. So she helped make the book even better than it was when we signed together, or when I signed with her, I should say.
Well, I would think you would be an ideal client with your background, because she's not going to have to, I assume, hold your hand as much and explain how things work to you, because you've been there, Yeah,
I mean, the business has changed a lot, though. I mean, it's been almost now 11 years since I last worked in the business. So I think like, a year or two after I had left, I was still really on top of things. And I still do have that sense, but I think that things are very different now. So, but I have other writer friends who I've kept in touch with. I meet within a writers group, and so I've heard a lot about, how they're seeing the business change. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely, I think, helps that I have that background. It gives me a little bit of perspective, but it's still different being on the other side, being a writer, being an author. You're not on the inside, so you still have that feeling of like they're doing things behind the scenes, and you don't really know what's happening that authors sometimes talk about. But I'm also grateful not to be the one doing that behind the scenes work, because I know it's hard work. It's really time consuming, and I have all the admiration for people who work in publishing, because it isn't, we always used to joke, oh, it's not brain surgery, like nobody's going to die on the operating table, but yet these things still, are taken very seriously, and people put passion and love and hard work into it. And so I'm very appreciative of that.
Well, what are some of the biggest changes that have been brought to your attention in the 10 years since you were in the room where it happens?
I mean, I don't know. I guess to me, the biggest thing that I would think of that comes to mind is just everything becoming electronic in terms of like submissions. We used to get the boxes in from the agencies, like each agency would submit manuscripts, printed out manuscripts in a box. That's how they would submit things now. And obviously it's all electronic. So I feel like if I went into a publishing house now, like I'd be like, where's the orange box from Curtis Brown and this color box from, each agency and what their box looked like. And I guess that's all gone. I think that when I left the industry in like 2010, people were really worried about ebooks taking over and what that meant. But I think that actually like print sales are still very strong, and that hasn't, what they thought back 10 years ago was going to happen hasn't necessarily. I mean, maybe now with COVID and quarantine, it's ebook sales are back up, but there was like a real feeling of like print books might not exist anymore, and that doesn't seem to have happened. So that's good.